Kevin Zay, do you think the anti-vaccination movement is very cult-like? Or is that more the case of people who don't have a good grasp on critical thinking and the scientific method, believing something because they saw one study or heard it from someone who presents themselves as an authority on the subject? I hesitate to call anti-vaxxers stupid because, as you have said before, anyone can get drawn into a crazy belief system. Absolutely. So, as far as your first question, are they a cult? Well, there are certainly some people in the anti-vax movement, if we're going to call that community or movement or group of people, those words, then yes, there are people in that group who have extreme beliefs on the subject and demonstrate those extreme beliefs every time you try to talk to them on the topic. It's just they're all bad, and it becomes government and conspiracies and all kinds of unprovable, unfalsifiable assertions that just kind of run you around in circles like any conspiracy theory. And there are people who are susceptible to falling for that level of belief and lack an objectivity and a self-awareness to be able to apply their critical thinking skills to themselves. And I don't know if there's a word for that, but that is what's going on with them, because these are people who, you said you hesitate to call them stupid, and that's good, because I've yet to meet a single person who has taken an anti-vax position who was a dummy. They had all kinds of things to cite and talk about and videos to link up to and documentaries. And point being, they had lots of references to go to that appeared to be factual, even objective, even-handed. And they are not, but they appear to be that way. And so people can fall for them just based on a good appearance. This is where the fact-checking of the fact-checking becomes so important. It's not a black and white issue. And that's why I'll put this on a spectrum, like I put almost everything on a spectrum of some kind. In other words, there are gradations or levels of extremism, and there are levels of belief or faith in a thing. There are levels of knowledge about a thing. Some people who are in the anti-vax movement, some of the reasons for being anti-vaxxers are completely debunked, very, very untrue, but they believe them still, right? They hold on to those beliefs and they think this is why I have to be an anti-vaxxer. Others that I have seen have spoken more intelligently on it. They go, look, not all vaccines are bad, but there are questions about this one and this one. And the studies that get done on these vaccines, I have questions about, or shouldn't, they don't get enough studies or tests. And there's some pros and some cons to some of those arguments. They're not completely off the rails in asking some of those questions, but they think that by merely asking the question, that shows some big, huge, gaping hole in medicine and science, which doesn't necessarily exist. For example, the idea that enough studies are not done on these vaccines before they're released to the general public. Well, they are certainly tested to the degree that they're not poisonous. They're not killing more people than they're helping. But you could say there are not enough tests being done, even if there were 10,000 tests being done on a thing, on a drug, let's say, or a vaccine. Like, at what point is enough testing enough? That's a legitimate question, and it's a tough one to answer. And so we have to look very context specific. Here's a vaccine that's going to literally save X number of people's lives if we give it to them. We have questions about its efficacy with the other, X number, or maybe there's a smaller number where there's a negative effect, right? So, okay, well, now we have numbers to look at. Now we have to gauge what's the greater good here, and these kind of moral questions come up. But is further testing always the answer? Well, not necessarily. Because if there's if the number of people this is going to objectively and immediately save is greater than the potential risk, then you should get it out to those people just based on the concept of the greatest good for the greatest number, which is not in and of itself a horrible way to evaluate a problem. So anyway, I'm just throwing one little tiny thing out there of like one of the things that happens with the arguments that the anti-vaxxers use. But those are not stupid questions that the anti-vaxxers are asking. They're not stupid ideas. And they reveal that there is a nuanced, complicated answer. It's not a simple answer. It's not black and white. And just too many people just get so black and white thinking these days that's where we have the cult-like thinking enter in, and then they start talking about the children, and all this other stuff comes entering in, and it's all just appeal to emotion and not based on too much of the anti-vaxxer arguments are not based on sound science, although they think they are and they sound like they are, but they're not. Or they're based on, other logical fallacies, as I've just described. So it's not that all of the people who have questions about vaccinations or bring this up as an issue of concern, they're not all a bunch of cultists. They're not all crazy. But if they talk to you like they are, you might need to calm them down if you want to engage with them, because they're used to being treated as a cultist. And that itself can become its own kind of problem, is when we see crazy ideas, crazy beliefs, and we think somebody subscribes to them deeply and extremely, and assume things about that person, which we should not be assuming at all, and in fact could push them in that direction if we keep doing that to them, and will certainly make them, a bit punchy, on the whole thing. So it's good to, try to engage one-on-one with people in a way that really where they're coming from, and they know where you're coming from, and and in this most ideal of ideal worlds, we would all get along, right?